within the content, you keep seeing human faces, because Magana on the podcast said this, Jakub on the podcast said this, Tom said this, Jennifer said this, So first of all, or as an additional benefit, it's more visually interesting when you have these faces and these quotes. Second, you can embed your YouTube episodes in the content. It's so much more human, even if on the back end it's AI that's helping you to do it, right? Because this would be very difficult to do with just human effort pre AI. But AI can look through this content really fast, find relevant parts really fast, and insert that into the blog post, right? So and then you have this rich piece of content that I think really, really works. So if you haven't tried that yet, I would really recommend it. Generally speaking, one thing that I think content marketers or marketers in general should be doing is building these databases, database of case studies, database of podcast transcriptions. That's something that a lot of marketers are doing right now. But if you're not, I think it's time, right, to start experimenting with these things. So that's a way that we enrich our blog content with the podcast content. And another piece of advice.
Hey everyone, welcome to Growth and Conversions podcast. Marketing in healthcare is difficult. Your buyers are busy, skeptical from the tech vendors. Most marketer responds to that by doing more campaign, more content, and more techniques. Today's guest does something completely different. He is a headhunter, not a recruiter, a marketer who actively hunts the right people, right podcast guest, the right conversation, and the right event for relationship building. He builds a great pipeline out of those conversions. He's Jakub Grajcar. He's head of marketing at Talkie AI, an AI medical receptionist platform, builds and run from Poland. Welcome, Jakub. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Magana. Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I'm excited to meet you. We talked some time back, and I love when you mention your marketing strategy. Can you tell me one fundamental thing in your strategy that makes everything work?
Yeah. So, I have this radical notion because my context, as you mentioned, is currently I'm at Talkie AI. This is AI healthcare startup. I would call us a scale up, honestly. We have, I think like 30 people, over 30 people right now. We've been on the market for a few years. We've been doing voice AI even before ChatGPT, which is an interesting place to be in and a lot of experience. But before that, I was at a US agency, US marketing agency, actually project management agency for marketing agencies, but that's not super important. Before that, I was in software development. Throughout all that time, I learned a lot as a marketer. And I think the number one thing that I learned is that you need to talk to the market when you're a marketer. It's a radical notion, right? But I think it's an important one where I've seen a lot of marketing work where it's done pretty much sitting by yourself. Maybe you do research by reading up on your buyers, you look through articles, you look through Reddit is a good place to do research, right? I'm not negating that. Quora used to be quite popular for this kind of research. That's all well and good, but when things really changed for me as a marketer was 2020 when COVID happened, and I started running podcasts and live streams, and I started really inviting people who were our clients, our team members, potential clients, experts in the market, and I started having real conversations with them. This is, the one thing I would love to change in this whole profession is I think we should be having, as marketers, a lot more conversations with the market. And this is the one thing that changed it all for me, honestly, because for example, when I joined Talkie, even when I was being recruited, this is what I campaigned on. I'm going to start a podcast for you. And here's why. Healthcare is an industry that's based very much on relationships. You need to have the right doors open for you. You need these warm introductions, get into the right, organizations like ACOs, other types of organizations within this space. And then you can reach, not just a couple practices with your offering, but like a few dozen practices, because they all have these organizations that they're part of. I could see that even from the outside as I was, looking to join the healthcare space. So I said the best way to initiate these conversations, or at least one very valid way, is to start a podcast. I mean, you know this, right? I'm on a podcast right now with you, and you know that this has started the conversation between us, right, on LinkedIn and stuff. So, and this is what I've been doing, talking with healthcare leaders. It's so great on so many levels, honestly. One of them being you get to understand your buyers as people, not just as a persona that's in a slide deck, not just based on what they wrote in, an industry article,
I
but what
love
they
this.
really care about, what they really think about. Sometimes the best insights honestly come after the recording when they give you a piece of information, a piece of intel about your market that's, maybe not fit for print, but it can still stick in your mind and be used, as a valid piece of what they're really about and what they really care about. So yeah, the number one thing for me has been, marketers should talk with their market. Again, maybe a radical notion, but I've been following it and it's been working for me.
Absolutely. People sometimes marketers say, yeah, we all the time talk on LinkedIn, but
Yeah.
that's not real talk. Talk to the people behind the LinkedIn, behind this. I always listen to the calls. I want to understand the Polish market. So I started going to the event. I started speaking with the people. And now I'm focused more inviting Polish guests, like, Polish marketeers, founders, just to understand how they're doing marketing and what works for them and what not. Exact the same idea, your philosophy, I'm like, applying it in my own
Yeah.
learning, marketing, that you need to speak with your client. You
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
speak with your market, what's happening, what they're doing, how they're doing. Not maybe the direct line. Yes, if you could, yes, but it's this is how we build the relationship. And I absolutely agree. Speak with your people, understand, allow them to ask questions, because that's when you understand what's their pain points are, right? So, and you also mentioned that you are following Sweetfish Media, where they are also one of the top podcast led growth. What is the one thing that you learn from it? How are you applying it in your day-to-day life, in your marketing strategy? How are you applying
Yeah, so the story with Sweetfish Media, I should look up what they're doing right now, but basically they're a podcasting agency.
that?
I
Mm-hmm.
encountered them a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and James Carberry was a big inspiration of mine. I'm happy to say, since a couple of years ago, I was also able to interview him. That was a big moment for me. And Marcus Sheridan, who wrote "They Ask You Answer," it's a great content and SEO book. So anyway, James Carberry wrote a book a few years ago called "Content Based Networking," and that's been my
Mm-hmm.
mantra, or it was at least for a while, and it's still a very important concept in my mind. It speaks to this strategy of, create content with your audience, not just for your audience,
Mm-hmm.
and that can lead to better results, and it initiates conversations. So after I read that book, it's not a long book. It not just shaped my marketing approach, but honestly my life philosophy to some extent as well. Connections are really important, and connections, I think, is this one area where it really pays off to have a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset. Because especially here in Poland, you've been here a while, you might have heard that, that, oh, they achieved success because they have connections. Somebody in business or in their career, oh, they have connections. Of course, they achieve success. I looked at that and I said, okay, so how do I make connections for myself? Not
Mm-hmm.
just use it as an excuse for, not succeeding or not having such success, but how do you make connections? And content is a great way to do that. Being a journalist in your space, asking questions, initiating these conversations. Of course, you have to kind of get through the cringe, right, and get through your own kind of self doubt about it. And I'm not saying to be very aggressive with it. I think there's a way to do it in a humble and curious way that actually gets people to answer, actually gets people to get on the interview, get on the call, respond to your email, etc. Right. So it all started with Sweetfish Media with that approach. Since then, James changed his tune a little bit. Okay, so I should add this nuance to the conversation. I feel like when you run a show, such as a podcast, you shouldn't, this is something I changed my mind on actually as the years went on. You shouldn't just be a host and just be a source of questions, okay? You're also, for better or for worse, a bit of a star of the show. You're the common denominator between all the episodes. So don't be afraid to add your own perspective to what the guest is saying, in an informed manner. Or don't be afraid to mix in some solo episodes into what you're creating. And James actually right now, or at least in recent months when I checked, he's been saying that it actually might make more sense to shift that weight towards like a pair of co-hosts that you have, You can still comment on the industry news, right? But you want people to get kind of addicted, quote unquote, to the co-host, right? This is why YouTubers are so popular. This is why podcasters are so popular. Not right these days, a politician, for example, wants to share their views, they go on podcasts, right? Because this whole medium has become so large, right? So I wouldn't say that I think the weight would be shifted in my case as much as for James, right? But I do think that you need to have this balance, right? Include your guests' insight, of course, present them as the experts, of course, but also recognize your own expertise, If it's episode 30, 50, 70 of your show, you're an expert as well. You've interviewed more people than, 99% of the population on a given topic. Give yourself that credit and start sharing your own thoughts too. Or, start becoming a guest on other podcasts as well, like I'm doing right here, right now.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So, what are some questions that you would ask speaking with other marketing, whether you are in an event?
That's an interesting one. I do have some favorite questions, definitely. This depends on, on an event versus a podcast conversation, it's a little bit different, right? So to start, for example, with the podcast conversations, my thing is that for all the podcasts I've run thus far, I've had the number one tip question, right? So I think it's important to have a question or two that actually lends itself well to short form content, okay? We would love it for people to consume like an 1 hour podcast episode, just gobble it up, right? The full thing just based on the title or the thumbnail or something. And that's great. But sometimes you have to give people like a little bit of a taster, right? So the taster needs to be a clip, or, that's one way to do it. And for a good clip, you need to ask a good question. So one of my favorite questions is, what is your number one tip for this given domain? So on scaling practice management, the podcast that I run for Talkie, I ask, what is your number one tip for successfully growing a healthcare practice, right? I have it totally memorized already, right? And it's great because, you ask that question over 20 or 25 episodes, you've almost got like an ebook or like a book, right? Some people like Tim Ferriss, for example, they've written books just based on the insights of others, right? Kind of collecting all of that into a curated collection, so collecting it into a collection. Yeah, good. So anyway, so that's a good one. Another one that I actually learned from Sweetfish is the start stop question. So what is one thing that in this case healthcare leaders, for example, should start doing and should stop doing? Maybe you won't ask that at a conference. At a conference, I feel like, instead of trying to steer the conversation into your particular business, you can ask, what have you tried in this area that has worked for you? Have you tried AI? Where have you tried it? What have you heard about AI? Or for marketing, what's working for you? I like that question very much. What's working for you? Because I wouldn't want to. How should I say this? I think sometimes people approach it from the perspective of, I'm looking to make them feel bad about what they're doing. Like, what are the challenges? Get them to complain. That's certainly one approach, right? But I feel like it's good to start in a positive way. What's working for you? What are you already doing that you're getting good returns from? And then try to build on that. Okay, and have you also tried this? Have you also tried that? That's one thing. When I'm having a third possible context, let's say you're having a networking conversation, you invited somebody for a coffee, via LinkedIn, which I really recommend you do. More people than you realize are going to say yes to something like that. The key questions that I ask there, and I learned this from Kurt Schmidt, actually, who's a great agency guy, and he taught me a lot about networking, still in touch with him to this day. He asks, what are your goals and what are you looking for, or who are you looking for? Every conversation he asks about the goals, or what problems they're trying to solve and who they're looking for. If you ask this during one conversation, that might be uneventful. But if you have 15 conversations and if you keep a log of what they said, somebody at conversation 15 is going to say, I'm looking for somebody who you spoke with at conversation 2, and you can connect them, and people are really grateful for these connections. Me personally, I derive a lot of pleasure and satisfaction from making these connections, and they remember you. Or another thing you can try, if you hear that from these 15 conversations 7 people mention that they have this one problem, right? You know that if you run a webinar on this problem, you can invite them. Or even you could invite all of them to like a group session. You all said you have this problem. Probably all of you have pieces of the solution. Let's put our brains together. It's a brainstorm or mastermind, call it what you want, right? But this all happens through the conversations. The conversations can bring you so much inspiration, but you have to break out of your shell and do it, which brings me to my, to my previous point. And I do hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. It does. It does. It does. I remember, like, collecting. I like this idea, collecting other people's opinion. Sometime back, I had created a playbook for my client. We were doing a CRO service, so CRO product it was, and how other people, what are the type of A/B test experiments that they are running, and we had 100 plus different A/B test experiments, and we created the playbooks because we asked everyone, and then we had created a playbook, and then after the webinar we were giving that playbook, which was just for an inspiration that what type of A/B test we should be doing, not just button colors and all, but there are
Yeah.
very different types of A/B tests that we can do. People have been doing, they are getting great results along with what they've done, what was the results like look like, and I created the playbook. So it was not like it was a people generated content. I used it in the playbook, and I give them in the form of, it was very very successful campaign. I was, and I had a great results for that. So that brings me to the next question. You said, okay, reuse and repurpose the content, and how would you build the content flywheel around it? Let's say I give you the episode right now, or you record an episode. How do you use that for repurposing it, and how do you use that for at the end building the revenue, or like conversions, because that's where we go around. So how do
Yeah.
you do that?
That can be such a rich conversation. I think there's things that you can do with a podcast episode that are quite obvious, and a lot of people are doing them. And then there's some other things that are not as obvious, or things that I've seen work for me. So of course you cut out shorter clips, right? That's
Mhm.
still worth doing. It's worth giving your content a shot, for example, in the YouTube Shorts algorithm or the TikTok algorithm. The way these work is you can attract a totally new audience with these short form videos, so it's still worth doing them. I think it's a matter of consistency and trying out different formats for this, although I wouldn't call myself an expert on like going viral, on YouTube Shorts. Okay, so have these, but once you have that shorter form video in your hand, of course you can post that on social media as well. We're still in the realm of the stuff that most people still do, right? But here's something that we're doing at Talkie that I think is quite unique. We took the transcripts of all of our episodes, put them in a Google Doc, and punched that into Claude. So connected it to Claude, right? Even the free version of Claude can do that, depending on how much of these transcripts you have, right? So these are verbatim transcripts. So now we also use Claude for writing blog posts. Pretty much everybody does use some AI for this at this point, right? To assist, there's still human review, human editing, but not using it, at least in some capacity, at this point is very inefficient, right? You pretty much have to do it. But the unique step in our process is for anything we write about, we also ask Claude to look through the podcast. Do we have any relevant quotes for that? Do we have any relevant fragments of the episodes? And this creates this nice little hybrid of, okay, the content may be partially AI generated, again, human reviewed, etc., fact checked, sure. But within the content, you keep seeing human faces, because Megana on the podcast said this, Jakub on the podcast said this, Tom said this, Jennifer said this. So first of all, or as an additional benefit, it's more visually interesting when you have these faces and these quotes. Second, you can embed your YouTube episodes in the content. It's so much more human, even if on the back end it's AI that's helping you to do it, right? Because this would be very difficult to do with just human effort pre AI. But AI can look through this content really fast, find relevant parts really fast, and insert that into the blog post, right? So and then you have this rich piece of content that I think really really works. So if you haven't tried that yet, I would really recommend it. Generally speaking, one thing that I think content marketers or marketers in general should be doing is building these databases, database of case studies, database of podcast transcriptions. That's something that a lot of marketers are doing right now. But if you're not, I think it's time, right, to start experimenting with these things. So that's a way that we enrich our blog content with the podcast content. And another piece of advice with regards to distribution, for better or for worse, what I found is pretty useful is just directly sending people podcast episodes, to be honest. DMs and emails, personalized. You have to think about it like this. The barrier to entry, or I should say the filter that people have, is getting stronger and stronger, right? So if it's not a personalized outreach, they kind of filter it out. And if it's personalized but it's salesy, they filter that out too. Okay, so I think you need to go a step further even to serve the audience and make them feel grateful that you reached out. Hey, I'm reaching out because you posted about, I don't know, insurance compliance in the US. I just recorded an episode about it. Here you go, have a listen. Or here's a clip, have a listen, here's the full episode, right? Like curated content for that specific person. It takes effort, of course, but AI can help here as well, right? Here's their LinkedIn profile. What should I send them? I've done it, right?
Mhm.
And then that can help you initiate more conversations. So these days, I'm looking through the healthcare practices that I want to reach via Talkie, send them a LinkedIn invite, and I begin by sending them a podcast episode picked for them with a justification of why I picked it for them. If this is not a right episode for you, maybe it can send you something else, but it's just it initiates a conversation. It's been pretty
Mhm.
good. Some people gave me feedback on the podcast, others said this looks nice, could I come on as a guest? And the snowball, or the flywheel, if you will, it goes from there. That leads to more episodes, more insights, more angles, and it also gives you a lot of ideas. I think one question, I know I'm going on, okay, but one additional thing. One question that I think a lot of marketers should be asking themselves about their content is, who would I send this to? Just a specific person I would send this to. When you start looking through this lens, you want to make your content much, much more specific, right? So I knew that we're talking with a lot of what are called direct primary care practices. You pay a subscription instead of going through your insurance. So I knew I needed to record an episode for them. So
Mhm.
that helps with the distribution because it's already baked in. I already know who I'm going to send this to. Now I just need to find somebody to record it with. I already have that episode, by the way. But yeah, as soon as you start thinking about specific people who you spoke with or want to speak with, the content brain, the creativity fires back up, is what I found. So it's a great thing to try, and that's how the flywheel works.
Absolutely. I love this. I have recently built an AI automation, which what it does is so it analyzes what they are posting about on social channels like LinkedIn, GitHub, Product Hunt, or even Reddit. So this is I'm using this Epify connector. So what you are posting about, so it's not about what Tokia is doing generic, which Clay and other tools does, but this one is okay. Right now your priorities are what, so it analyzes that, and then we are connecting, we can connect our content, we can, and we don't have to rebuild the content for them. But this AI, because I'm developing this Claude is doing that. Okay, rebuild the assets for this particular client if I'm, like, if I'm targeting them. And I already have like a proper segmentation done for the done who likes what kind of things. So
Mhm.
yes, if they like revenue, if they're talking about revenue, if they're CEO founders, so they are getting a specific type of content. If you are a marketer, you are getting a specific kind of, because every company there are different buying committee, right?
Mhm.
And they don't want somebody to, like, everybody has their own priorities to talk about. They don't think about, oh, that's not, like, that's not my problem, that's problem about salesperson, so I don't have to take care about that. So I would not send them material which is not relevant for them, but I would send them material which is relevant for them based on your priority and how the AI is. So right now, this Apify actors are analyzing it, and then because I have does this scoring model, so it goes into different buckets, and accordingly the content has been sent. So not, it's built, it's working, but I'm still, like, updating that kind of system. I'm recording the we post video around that. If you want, of course, happy to
Yeah,
share
I was
that.
just going to say that would be a cool video to watch.
It's recording. I'm right now editing there, and because I'm also simultaneously editing takes time, and for me, I'm also building that. I'm testing that live. How is it working with the different clients? It's, of course, I will send you if you want, for sure. But
Awesome.
that brings me. You are in a healthcare industry, traditional industry. What do you think about AI? How much AI should be using, and, like, where should we stop? what's working well, and how do you sell your AI product to the traditional industry?
That's an interesting question. I think, currently in healthcare, especially US healthcare, AI is a very big topic, of course. I mean, I think most people know that. Traditional industry, yes. However, I think the wave is absolutely here when it comes to AI in US healthcare. And even I would say the wave of what we do, AI medical receptionists, is also absolutely here. We're seeing a lot of interest. Some of that is due to the quality of the product, but to be realistic, it's interest in the category itself as well, right? Uh, but it's a double-edged sword, really, because on the one hand, you have this huge inefficiency that's on the front desk at healthcare practices. I mean, this is something that surprised me when I joined Talkie. I was speaking with our COO, Ada. She was onboarding me, and she said, "Look, it's a good result for a medical practice if they're not picking up 30 or even 40% of their phones, if they're picking up half, a little bit over half of the calls that are coming in, that's a good result. That's the status quo. And with Talkie, you can pick up 100%. So this, the gap between where the medical practices are right now and where they could be, it's a very different picture right now compared to like 5 years ago. So I think it's a matter of like moving standards. We see this in marketing as well. To be honest, the standards of like how much output a marketer should have in 2026 versus 2016 is very different because marketers should be using AI. They should be outputting more content, for better or for worse, really. But even myself, with I would say I have a balanced view on AI, right? I would expect people to expect more output from me. So this is a similar thing, in healthcare. I think the expectations are shifting, right? The expectations are shifting. At the same time, of course, there are objections around AI. We hear them. We hear them every day. Patients don't want to speak with the AI, for example, is a common one. Okay, but they do want to be able to schedule a visit at like 10 p.m., 3 a.m. They want to be able to reach the practice when it's after hours, and they want to be able to do it through like a flexible interface where you just speak and the AI just understands. There's nuance here, of course, right? But we're really, really close to to it basically being as flexible and as understanding or as intelligent as a human receptionist, right? So some patients still have issues with talking with the AI, but what we have found for each of our implementations is that there's this initial wave of doubt. Over time, month after month, it keeps going down. So it's like with any change, initially there's a little bit of resistance. Over time, it goes down, and then what's left are really the benefits. 100% of calls are picked up. You can pick up calls after hours. You can automate so much stuff away, even scheduling conversations, even signing up a new patient for the practice, and definitely, answering questions like, do you have parking? Can I pay by card? Do you take my insurance? So healthcare practices are getting used to AI more and more, and they know that this is now an expectation. It's kind of like when they were digitizing in the first place, moving from paper to digital, right? Now the expectation is to have some AI in the mix. And in fact, just this morning I was looking through some research that a higher percentage of patients would prefer for their practices to have human plus AI instead of just human and just AI, right? So they also want that efficiency, right? It's like saying, would you like your medical practice to be human only so they no longer have this online portal to sign up for a visit? No, you want that convenience as well. There's room for technology, and healthcare practices are really, waking up to that for AI as well. It's interesting. It's like a cultural shift that's happening. It's interesting to also be at a company that's part of this cultural shift. We're kind of changing the minds of the market, one implementation at a time, or even one post at a time. But yeah, that's what I'm seeing. So you called it a traditional market, a traditional industry. Yes, and the regulations are kind of can slow things down a bit, but everybody's looking for ways to leverage AI because honestly, the convenience and the efficiency is worth it. The only question is, how not to go too far with it. But that's why companies like Talkie exist. We kind of fine tune it so that what AI can and should do will do. What the humans should still do, they still do. Finding that sweet spot is a big part of what we do.
Absolutely. Two points here. One thing I want to tell you that I love something that's built in Poland because I have worked product built at the low cost and all. And now I'm in Poland. I have seen product developers around are doing absolutely amazing job, and I like, that's why I want to grow career my here, because uh, like good product builders around in Poland here, I would say. Since I'm more into developer, around everywhere around me there are developers around, and I see they're doing very, very good job. Otherwise they are not doing, they're getting fired. So obviously the quality is maintained. But the point I would like to ask you is, what about the privacy? How are you, privacy of the patient's contact numbers? Are you kind of taking care of that? Is there something ever the concern around this?
Well, definitely. I mean, we're HIPAA compliant at Talkie. We have this SOC 2 Type 2 certification also for our data standards. The most sensitive thing is definitely, personal health information, or PHI, right?
Mhm.
So, with regards to anything that touches that is really locked down, and even we have to ask ourselves for each instance, like, how many people should have access to this data, to what extent, should the access be constant, or should it be just for one particular purpose, and then the access is revoked, right? Honestly though, you don't need that personal health information to run successful marketing, right? There's so much more other information that you can use. And again, having conversations, for example, like on a podcast, right? That gives you something that you can mine, that is different than, looking at the conversations that the agent is having, and accessing that. So it is a concern. It feels like, so what I would say here is that,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
1 minute. I'm so sorry. I have a bad health today.
take your
We
time.
can continue.
Good,
No,
good
we can
timing.
continue. Thank you so much for patience. Let's go.
So with regards to privacy, it's definitely a matter of being conscious and conscientious about it, and having strong guidelines. With the SOC 2 Type 2 certification, not everybody's aware. Like, there's SOC 2 Type 1 and SOC 2 Type 2. And Type 1 requires you to have your guidelines like written down for you to have standards. Type 2, however, it's much more difficult to get that certification, because you actually have to prove that you're following your guidelines. And I have a feeling that that should be the main point, right? Not that you have something written down. I can have a diet plan written down. That doesn't mean I'm following it, right? The important thing is to prove that you're following it, right? So, with that certification in place, at least for a company like Talkie, it's an indication that we are following these privacy practices. Still, in the healthcare market, there's a lot of research, a lot of organizations or statistics that you can kind of look through if you want to add this, statistical edge to your content. There's stuff you can leverage without going into PHI, definitely.
I love this. When you mention that you call, headhunter, can you please elaborate a little more? How do you find the exact person for your podcast, for the guest, content, and the event? How do you do this headhunting? What are your secret sauce? Yeah.
Definitely. Well, there's a few ways to do it. Definitely. One way is to ask yourself, who you want to reach as potential clients, and that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. For example, when talking with leadership, right, about the podcast. Well, here's a medical practice. They have so many people. What if I reach out to their marketing person and see if there's interest in a podcast episode? And I feel like there's layers to this, because this is the first thing that comes to mind for people. However, I feel like it's important to also leave a little bit of this to like the power of the network. Spend time on LinkedIn, not too much, I guess, but
It's
but
addictive.
yeah, it can be a little bit addictive, right? So, but what I mean is, you find your first few guests. You ask around, you ask your connections. Do you know somebody in healthcare? I was asking my connections from my previous company as I was joining Talkie, and that's how I got the first interview. And the nice thing about that was, he was running his own podcast. He was a podcast host, so I can look through his guests, see if they're going to join. So that's like a second major source. Look for people who are on other podcasts. You don't want to necessarily reuse guests all the time. But honestly, podcast hosts, this is such a great discipline. We trade guests all the time because it doesn't actually harm anyone, right? If somebody's on more than one podcast. So that's another major source. Other than that, it just pays off to pay attention to who's engaging, who's leaving comments, who's posting on what topics, right? These days, of course, you can research this with AI. I would say researching podcast guests with AI, though, typically is going to surface big names for you. If you land them,
Yeah.
that's great. If you're a more established podcast, we're 25 episodes in. I should probably be doing some more AI research, honestly, right now myself. Right? But I think it's worth it to just look for the people who have like a modest LinkedIn following. They're really keen to get on a podcast. They will promote your episode like crazy. So consultants are like that, for example. They do a lot of their own marketing, so they do both the marketing and the delivery, which means they're good at marketing, they're good at speaking, they're good at presenting their points and being persuasive, and they have this substantive knowledge in their mind. So they make for great guests. Melissa Delfino from the Scaling Practice Management podcast, for example, that was such a good episode. She was talking about, and we didn't even talk so much about like AI front desk, a little bit, but our main topic was like how healthcare leaders can do emotional regulation to be better leaders. So, how to stay calm, how to uh, unload the stress, kind of how to tame the stress of running a healthcare practice, for example, and the different techniques for that. So these are a few of the ways that you can headhunt, but honestly, just keep at it. Keep asking your guests if they know somebody who they would recommend. That's a good one. Often they will. And stay in touch with them. You never know what else you can do with them. A podcast can lead to a webinar. A webinar can lead to like a longer partnership. I've seen it happen. I've done it. So it's good to kind of keep that relationship going as well. Again, this is a broad and deep topic, but these are some of the first tactics to try there.
Okay, amazing. And how about now, as we are ending to our episode, can you give one tip for the other marketeers what they should do with AI, without AI, specific or fundamentals that has worked for you? One piece of advice for the marketer.
Yeah, specifically about AI, I would say find ways to automate small things, but in a complete way. I feel like that's where a lot of the value is because I feel like, initial experiments with I mean, I've done it as well, right? Is okay, so hello, AI, could you solve all of my marketing for me? Here's my website, the main page. You can do this, right? Just run our marketing, and then the output is honestly really poor, right? Not enough context. The brief is too broad, right? But pick slices of your marketing work and just refine them one by one. So, for example, for running the Scaling Practice Management podcast, uh, I noticed that the more specific I got with the conversations, the better the output was. So today we're just writing the show notes, okay? And then for the show notes, I either improve the prompts or I turn it into a skill in Claude, or I have enough of these show notes where, if you give them as context and you give the transcript of the next episode, it can kind of follow the pattern, right? And that is a problem that's solved, right? I can have a good title, thumbnail, a good copy for an episode, within like 5 minutes. That's where the real value lies for me in AI. And then you give it the next problem. Okay, now could you pick the excerpts that I'm going to use for shorts, or something that I'm going to put as the teaser at the beginning of the episode. Okay, work on that, refine it until within one prompt or two prompts you get what you want. Turn that into a skill in Claude, or find some other way to kind of save that work and move on to the next problem. If you go problem by problem, I feel like, if you put it into modules like this, you're going to get a lot of value. That, and the other piece of advice I already shared, but I would re-emphasize: build these databases that AI can actually pull from. So, for example, the practice that we used to have was to put all the blog posts that we're writing in separate Google Docs files, right? Don't put them in separate files. You can have these tabs in Google Docs right now, put them in one file, and then give that file to Claude, and it can learn from 30 blog posts at once. This is a very small, very tactical thing, but you need to be thinking in terms of these data repositories, because AI needs to have something to actually draw from to give you good output. And if you spread it across so many files, it's just going to be inconvenient, right? So these are some of the things that that I think marketers should do. A lot of them are doing that. The main thing is to just set aside time to kind of improve the system, not just work the system, not just create the content, but also improve the prompts, improve the AI, and that'll save you more and more time as you go forward while keeping the quality, and that can really, really work.
I use a lot of AI. Sometimes so much that I feel, am I using like AI? I learned 8 months N10. It was technical, and then now Claude came. Okay, now I don't need to use that much N10, but of course
Mhm.
it's still usable because copy paste, like some personalized task which I want to do, Claude cannot do it, so I still use N10. But now a lot of things which I thought I will make N10 to do, now Claude is doing it without any technical knowledge, so
Yeah.
expertise. So it's good. Like, it's sometimes I feel, is it really reduced my work or it has increased my work, because I'm actually, like,
It's
yes, I'm
possible.
more.
Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, and sometimes it just stays worse. You need to know to pick your battles here. It
Yeah.
can still serve as good inspiration, though. I mean, just earlier today, I was looking for ideas for our next email campaign. I asked for like
Mhm.
10 ideas, and I looked through them, and one of the ideas was it was a bad idea that gave me a good idea. So it's sometimes
I know.
useful even to get the poor output. Honestly,
I know. Thank you so much. It was wonderful conversation. This happens, and thank you so much for coming here, joining me today,
my pleasure.
and talking to me. Thank you so much.
Yes.